So we have brain scans to show that people are gazing into the kaleidoscope with their eyes open instead of with their eyes closed can relax their body. And as they relax their body and they practice relaxing with their eyes open, they move into alpha. Now, you can function in alpha with your eyes open. When you drive down the road in your car on the freeway and you just drove 45 kilometers or 45 miles and you have no idea the road was in front of you, you have no idea, you didn't feel your body, and you forgot about time. That you were in an imaginary state of alpha, and the brain was in a state of trance. And your inner world all of a sudden becomes more real than your outer world. And I'm watching many of you this week when I'm teaching, I'm watching you process information, and you're present, and you're listening, and you're in a low-level beta. And then all of a sudden, you stop, and you freeze your brain, and you move into alpha. And when you move into alpha, now you're making your inner world more real than your outer world, and the brain is beginning to consolidate that information neurologically. You're freezing a frame, and you begin to emboss it neurologically in your brain. That's how I know you're learning. By the same means, if you're in a very high level of beta, your brain can't switch to alpha, which means it's not a time to learn. It's not a time to be creative. It's not a time to open your heart. It's not a time to go within and take your attention off the outer world. There's imminent danger and a threat in the outer world. And people, of course, have difficulty practicing without knowledge and information on how to change that state in their brain and in their body. And that's what we're doing here, moving into more of the present moment. Beta brainwave patterns, the purpose of beta brainwaves is when your brain is trying to create meaning between what's going on in your outer world and what's going on in your inner world, it's got to process a lot of sensory information. You're hearing things, you're seeing things, you're feeling things, you're tasting things, you're smelling things, and all of this information coming into the brain has to be integrated. And if you measure the brain, this is what's called beta brainwave patterns. And in beta, as I said, the outer world is more real than the inner world. Close your eyes, disconnect from the external environment, slow your breathing down, play some soft music in the background, sit your body down and not get it up and eat and taste and smell and feel and experience. Less sensory information going to the brain causes your brain waves to slow down into alpha. And when you start moving into alpha, now your inner world starts becoming more real than your outer world, and you see more in pictures, in images. It is the realm of imagination. In beta, you hear somebody talking in your head a lot of times. That voice in your head, that's beta. So as you begin to slow it down, alpha all of a sudden becomes the creative state. You can hear the outer world, but more of your attention is on the inner world. And you know when you're talking to someone and you say, hey, I just said something to you. Did you hear me? And they're in their inner world, they're in alpha, and they're disconnecting or lowering the volume to their outer world. And it's the frontal lobe that lowers the volume to the circuits in the brain that process space and time. So a person can begin to make their inner world more real and no longer be distracted by their outer world. And then all of a sudden, if your body can get so restful and so relaxed and so out of survival that it can begin to rest in a light sleep, and your mind is still conscious and still awake, you're in theta. And look how slow those brainwave patterns are in theta. Now, the lights are going out in the neocortex, the memory bank of the known self, the neocortex that plugs you into three-dimensional reality. All of a sudden, you're diminishing brain activity there, and now you're getting beyond yourself. You're getting beyond your identity. Now, I used to think delta was deep sleep, but now I know that we have students that are processing delta, and their energy in their brain is off the chart. Their body is sound asleep, and they're transcendental. They're somewhere else. And high beta is an arousal from survival, from the stress hormones, and you feel fear, you feel aggression, you feel hostility, you feel anger, you feel pain. That's the arousal that's created in high beta. This arousal that's created in gamma creates a kind of super consciousness or super awareness. The person has more energy in their brain. First 2 years of a child's life, their brain waves are very slow frequency here. Here's frequencies, measuring different frequencies. Very low frequency. First 2 years of child's life, they're in delta brainwave patterns, 0.5 to 4 cycles per second. They're asleep with their eyes open. As they begin to progress between the ages of 2 and 6, they move into theta brainwave patterns, 4 to 8 cycles per second. Now, as they begin to interact in their environment, their brainwaves pick up, but we could say then, for the first 6 years of their life, they have no analytical mind, and they're completely programmable. And you can say, big boys don't cry, little girls should be seen and not heard. Money is the root of all evil. You're like me, you get sick easily. And all that information goes in unencoded or unedited, and it begins to lay down, just like a recording, a subconscious program. So the child then begins to interact with the environment. He sticks his finger in the light socket, notices a change in his internal state, feels pain, and all of a sudden wakes up and looks and narrows his focus to see what causes it. And he learns to associate that thing with pain, and all of a sudden he begins to move away from it, but now he's paying more attention to his outer environment because he's learning the laws. Now, as they progress, brain waves will move into 3 levels of beta. Check out low-level beta here. Then you look at mid-range beta. Here's low-level beta. Here's mid-range beta. Now look at high beta. High beta is 3 times as high as low-level beta. Now, you're all in low-level beta. You're all listening to me. You're relaxed. You're poised. You're paying attention. There's no threats in the environment, so your brain waves are relatively low in beta. But if I said to you, can you come on up and do the lecture? What I just did so far, you would start perking up into a little bit faster brainwave frequency. And I think of mid-range beta like eustress, like good stress. When you're getting ready to do something and you're a little bit nervous, but you're also kind of present and you're going to use that energy and you know what you're doing. That's mid-range beta. But up here is emergency. And this is when you're in a very, very highly aroused state. And no new information can enter the nervous system that is not equal to that emotion because it's not relevant at the time. We can say then, when you're born, you're totally subconscious mind. Why do we know that? Because your brain waves are very slow. And for the most part, you begin to learn by different positive and negative identifications and associations. A good example of a positive identification is when a child is hungry and she cries out. She learns to associate crying out with being fed. So every time she's hungry, she cries out and gets fed. A good example of a negative association is when you put your finger on the hot stove. You learn to associate pain with that white thing in the corner, and all of a sudden you begin to shape what we call habits and behaviors. Somewhere between the ages of 6 and 9, we begin to form what's called our analytical mind or our critical mind. It totally finishes developing somewhere between the ages of 9 and 10, but for most people between 7 and 9. And that analytical mind then acts as a separation from the conscious mind from the subconscious mind. Now, your conscious mind, we've been saying all along this week, is 5% of your total mind. It's made of things like logic and reasoning, which gives rise to your will, your faith, your creativity. Now, this other 95% is made up of all those subconscious habits, emotional reactions, behaviors. And they're running behind the scenes of your awareness. You're unconscious to them. So then the analytical mind is always working. It's thinking in terms of good and bad, right and wrong, positive and negative, male and female, success and failure. Because the brain is divided, the mind processes things in duality. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I love my analytical mind. When you're learning, when you're navigating ethically in your life, you need an analytical mind. But when the hormones of stress are thrown into the equation, now a person becomes overly analytical or overly focused. Have you had that experience? And when you do that, you drive your brain into higher states of beta brainwave patterns. The whole purpose of meditation then is to get beyond your analytical mind, slow your brain waves down, enter the operating system where the programs are, and then rehearse a new program, rewrite a new program, condition the body to a new program, and change those self-limiting beliefs into more unlimited beliefs. Some people have a very thin veil between their conscious mind and their subconscious mind. They can get beyond their analytical mind very easily. Others of us have a little bit more dense analytical mind, and we have to work a little harder to get beyond it. But I'm telling you, if you apply the formula, just what you've been doing, have you noticed in your meditations that analytical mind just pops up every now and then, you notice it and you keep going. You have control over it because you start to master it. And so now you can choose what you want to be suggestible to in your life. And whatever you choose to be suggestible to, be ready to experience. That's it. And if you're watching TV and you're watching violence, well, you're programming yourself for that. So then our research shows then, as you slow your brain waves down and you do this properly, the less activity in the thinking neocortex, you start seeing more activity in the limbic brain, the seat of the subconscious mind. As consciousness flows out of the thinking brain and it moves into these subconscious centers, you can begin to program your subconscious mind in the way that you want. In a sense, just like the placebo. You give someone a sugar pill, a saline injection. You perform some false surgery or treatment. And a certain percentage of those people are going to accept, they're going to believe, and they're going to surrender to the thought that they're getting the actual substance or treatment. And they begin to program their autonomic nervous system, listen to this, to make the exact pharmacy of chemicals equal to the substance that they think they're taking. That's how programmable that autonomic nervous system is. And here's the question. Was it the inert substance that did the healing, or was it the body's innate capacity to heal?